Hello, and welcome to a very strange episode of Hannah and Eastwood Get Real. It's been a whirlwind 6 months since we started the podcast. And the first episode was simply titled The Pilot. And actually, looking back, it's an episode that neither of us can bear to watch
No.
because we were such snowflakes. But today marks the end of a year and the end of an era, because not only have many celebrities died this year, but also today we lay to rest the Hannah and Eastwood Get Real podcast. We'll explain why later on in the episode. But if you've forgotten who we are, myself, the gorgeous fellow, I am Sam Hanna, and I'll
I
let
am Harry Eastwood, and I am still alive, in case you were all wondering what's happened to me as I've slithered away into the dark. But yeah, unfortunately, I had a very shocking family bereavement, and my dad passed away very suddenly at the beginning of November. It was shortly after we recorded the Remembrance Sunday episode, weirdly,
yeah,
which was
yeah.
quite strange, really. So yeah, it's been a bit of a mad couple of months for me anyway. But we decided to take a break from the channel, obviously, because I had a lot to sort out my end, and yeah, it was the right thing to do. Yeah, so we are back now for a final episode, because we feel that the channel's sort of, as much as we've loved doing it and enjoyed doing it, a lot has happened in the last couple of months, and we're both now in the world of work, and so we've got very little time to put towards the channel. And we just feel like it's come to a natural end, really, after a pretty apocalyptic year, hasn't it?
So it just following on from what that idiot said.
Things don't change in a couple of months.
If you wanted to know where I had slithered away to, as Harry said, I am now a fully working man, and that is slowly taking its toll on me. I am now working on the NHS testing, trace, inquiries and feedback service. My name is Sam. How can I help you today? I've learnt the script well enough in the last couple of weeks, but I'm now dealing with a lot of self-isolation questions, a lot of self-isolation arguments, a lot of complaints, a lot of people moaning at me. But it's nice to be working. Finally earning real money, and I have to say the pay is very good. The pay is very good. The hours are decent, and it's weekly wage, rather than waiting for the month to end. So I'm currently rolling in money.
Just like to dish it out there for everyone.
I am single. If there are any women,
I thought that might be the reason why you were broadcasting it. But yes, anyway, we're both still single, so I'm also earning as well. So hello everyone. If anyone wants to slide into my DMs, but anyway,
I don't think that would happen for you, Harry.
No, neither do I. But anyway, let's move on. So this episode is basically our review of the year. So we're just going to be going over what has been an unbelievable and unforgettable year that none of us could ever have predicted. I remember people in 2019 saying, been a bit of a rubbish year. I think 2020 will be much better. And no one could have foreseen what has happened. And what a year. But there's lots to talk about, isn't there? Lots to cover.
Anyone who made the I have 20/20 vision joke. If you did foresee this happening, why did you not alert us? I am honestly, I was one of the few that didn't make the joke. And honestly, I feel I've achieved very little this year. But let's rewind back to January, where the first big story of the year was the plea for help with the Amazon and the Australian bushfires. I'll let you talk about that because you're an environmental scientist, so you know what you're talking about.
Well, yes, it was. I think it was the sign of things to come, wasn't it? Almost. It was. We're seeing these horrible scenes from Australia, and I remember seeing this clip of koala bears just walking about in the ashes and embers, really. And it was just horrifying, and it went on for weeks and weeks, didn't it? And it's once again, a sign of the acceleration of climate change. We also saw the forest fires in California this year. So this year hasn't been a great one in terms of the climate. And January, when the bushfires there were quite horrendous and very widespread, and it's only going to get worse, I'm afraid to say. But yeah, it was, as I say, a sign of things to come, I think, because this year did get very much worse for the whole world. And we moved on to February, and even in January, actually, there were sort of rumblings of COVID, weren't there? Sort of a few stories leaking out about the virus, and for some reason, I don't know, I'm sure everyone was the same. I don't think we ever thought it would come to this. I think we thought, it'll be contained, it'll all be sorted out.
It'll pass over. It'll pass over us.
Exactly.
And the thing is, in February, we were living life as normal. We're gone out clubbing. We've been to theatres together. We'd stayed at each other's house, which obviously now none of that is possible.
No.
And it's only been about 10 months since that happened, and how the world has changed in 10 months.
It is quite staggering, isn't it? And there's no sign of it coming to an end as far as I can see. But I never believed that in February or even in March, when the first lockdown was imposed, that we'd be sitting here at the end of December 2020, still stuck in absolute limbo, not knowing when this is going to end, what's going to come next. From day to day, you can't plan anything. And as you say, it doesn't bear any resemblance to the world we were living in back in February. And that's why it's hard to believe that January and February were even this year, because it just seems such a distant memory now.
Anyway, fast forwarding on to March, and we found ourselves on March the 23rd. Boris addressed the nation for the first time at 7 o'clock. Or was it 8 o'clock? 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock?
I don't think even he knew.
Sometime in the evening. It was 7 o'clock somewhere. To tell us that we must stay at home. The first lockdown, I was unemployed, so I thought this is a great opportunity to sort of find myself. And I think a lot of people I think a lot of the world, or a lot of the nation even, spent a lot of time finding themselves.
Absolutely.
Nobody expected the first lockdown, to go on as long as it did. My piano playing improved massively over the first lockdown.
Absolutely.
Mainly because Facebook sort of got out of hand. I did one Facebook Live concert, which turned into about 12, and I ended up doing one every week. To which I owe the man sat beside me a huge round of applause, because I didn't do all the hard work. It was constant messaging him, saying we need to write another show. Help.
Well, I need something to do as well because I was on furlough, so I was just sitting there twiddling my thumbs. But as you say, you know, I think people moan about lockdowns and moan about this whole year, but you've got to think of the benefits of it and the good things about it. And I think that as you say, this was the first lockdown particularly. I think, you know, I certainly relished it because it was personal time that you wouldn't normally have under any circumstances. The amount of free time you had to find yourself, as you say, do what you like, develop interests, get to know, you know, your family really well, all of that.
Well, you should really know your family.
You should, but you know, a lot of people don't spend so much, you know, that amount of concentrated time together. So, you know, I mean, I certainly, you know, I've always been close to my family, but you know, the amount of time we spent together was very valuable time, I think. You know, and I think about, you know, my dad passing away and everything, and I think actually what this year has given me is probably more valuable, concentrated time with my dad than many other people don't get in their lifetime because of various things. They might be in opposite ends of the country, they might be, you know, so it's things like that, you know, that I look back and think actually that was, you know, that was a really good thing about this year because I got to spend every day with my dad. So that's what gives me, you know, a lot of, I wouldn't say, it gives me consolation, let's say. But yeah,
I do look back over this year and think that this is like Billy Joel trying to update We Didn't Start the Fire. There was Barnard Castle.
oh.
In the first lockdown, there was the Barnard Castle debacle. There was Super Saturday when the pubs reopened. I remembered that because we did a whole episode dedicated to Super Saturday. We started the podcast, BLM. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Let's get the rant over and done with. Black Lives Matter. In May,
yeah.
George Floyd was shockingly killed. Now, that is something we can all agree on. The way he was murdered was absolutely appalling, and for the fact that it happened by he was murdered by a police officer makes you lose faith in the public service. However, what happened after that?
The fallout
spiraled out of control.
It really did.
And if none of our rant tonight makes sense, go back and we'll make a specified playlist just entitled BLM. All the rants from Hanna.
It'll be a long playlist.
It'll be a really long playlist. But yeah, where do we begin?
Well, I mean, in May, I think the first sort of major thing was the protest in Bristol. That was the first thing that I can remember, and the pulling down of the Colston statue. That was sort of the first real, what I would call a riot, because it was a riot, and that was just a shocking thing to see, to be honest. I mean, I couldn't quite believe what I was seeing. Crowds just pulling this statue and just dumping it in the river, and that caused a lot of conflict again. Some people were saying, you know, obviously Colston was a terrible man, which he was. He was a slave trader. But then there's the other side of the argument, which we were on, which was that it's part of our history. We should have it. You can't change history, and there's no point eradicating history because you can't learn from it. And the whole point of what's happened to George Floyd and everything is to learn from the past to help the future. And eradicating and cancelling history, our own history, doesn't help. And that's what a lot of people couldn't understand who were following BLM. And then, of course, we had the appalling desecration of the Winston Churchill statue, and the Cenotaph riots as well, which was just quite staggering. There were so many people supporting that, and you know, it just spiraled further and further out of control. We saw comedies being pulled off of streaming services, Little Britain, to name the biggest one, really. I mean, there was a huge number that got pulled, and once that started, it set off a chain reaction of snowflakes calling out all of these programs that were apparently racist. They weren't actually racist. It's called comedy, and it's called portrayal. Now, Little Britain took the piss out of all kinds of people, and they weren't deliberately trying to be racist. You know, racism is about intent. It wasn't intended. All it was they were actors, comedians portraying another character. So, and people can't see the wood for the trees on that for some reason. And then you know, we had things like the Cocoa Pops, didn't we? So it just went on, and politicization of TV constantly. It's gone through all this year.
Diversity on Britain's Got Talent, for example, depicting the whole George Floyd situation, which in a previous video, well, we go over the whole situation. But when you think it's a family entertainment program on prime time Saturday night, children would be watching. To depict something of that stature is absolutely disgusting. I was having a chat with some of my work colleagues about the BLM, and they share the same views as me. And they actually pointed something out to me and made me realise, look at the BLM in a completely different light. And they said George Floyd wasn't an angel.
Well, no,
he wasn't a perfect man. He was a criminal. He was a drug user. He threatened pregnant women to get money. And yet, obviously, as we said, the way he was murdered was absolutely appalling.
Yeah.
But the way the BLM
depicted him as this absolute, angel and hero. Yeah, absolutely. It was completely wrong. I completely agree.
All praise to George Floyd. No, because he was a criminal.
He had drugs in his body at the time of his death, and he also apparently held a gun to a pregnant woman's stomach when she was pregnant. This is not a nice guy. We're not saying that it wasn't horrendous what happened to him at, the murder of George Floyd, but this guy wasn't a saint, and they were just depicting him. All of these snowflake woke people who were joining in with BLM were depicting him as someone to look up to, which is disgusting, absolutely disgusting. And they just got the wrong end of the stick with it completely. But it's still bubbling away a little bit, isn't it? We had the Vicar of Dibley Christmas special, one of the 3 sort of 10-minute episodes that Dawn French has done over the last few weeks, and the second episode featured a bit of a lecture on BLM, and her opening words to that bit I thought were okay, because she was talking about equality and that all lives matter, and all of that. But then she proceeded to rip off some religious posters from the village notice board, and she put up a Black Lives Matter sign and then took to the knee, which to me is a party political broadcast, like what we saw on Britain's Got Talent. Now, I love the Vicar of Dibley and I love Dawn French, and I was actually shocked and very disappointed to see that. And again, of all the things they could pick up on, this is supposed to be a comedy show. Just don't ram it down our throats, please, when we want to sit there and watch The Vicar of Dibley. There's just no need for it. That's my opinion.
As we've said multiple times, and we've said it time and time again on this channel, all lives matter. Black, white, we're all the same.
Exactly.
And what we feel had happened and is still happening with Black Lives Matter is black supremacy. It feels like the whole Black Lives Matter movement are saying, actually, white people are the lesser race, and black people need to are more privileged than white people, and that isn't the case. Everybody is as privileged as everybody else. Obviously, there are classes. Some people are higher class, some people are middle class, some people are working class, some people are lower class. There's nothing we can do about that.
No.
But for the world to go on and for there to be peace in the world, we need to accept that black people are black, white people are white, and everybody is exactly the same. There's just a different colour of skin.
Exactly. And the problem with what's been happening is that it's actually pissing people off. All of this politicization of television, all of the stuff to do with Black Lives Matter is pissing people off. And the majority of people, the mainstream media, tend to paint this picture that everyone loves Black Lives Matter and everyone's supporting Black Lives Matter. But I can tell you that is not the case, because the majority of people I've spoken to have the same opinions as us, and it's just pissing them off, and it's actually fueling racism. And they can't see that. And that's why I'm so passionate about this, because racial equality is such an important issue, and they're missing the point completely and making it worse. That's why we've been so passionate about it on this channel. We are not racist. We are annoyed at the fact that they are going about this the wrong way and are clearly making things worse. I can tell you the majority of people in this country do not support Black Lives Matter. And I honestly...
And how could we forget Nabil, whatever his name was, from Britain's Got Talent?
Again, a party political broadcast.
He got through to the semi-finals. That happened in April. The semi-finals, as everybody's aware, the semi-finals happened in September, because obviously the lockdown meant that it can happen. That obviously the semi-finals happened after BLM. So he decided, I'm a comedian. I'm a comedian. I'm black. I'm going to do a set completely on BLM and about how white people say, I'm not racist, but and actually that was racist.
The other way around.
And obviously if you win Britain's Got Talent, you get to perform at the Royal Variety Performance. I would have loved to see Prince Philip see that routine. I have no idea what his response would have been, but I don't think he would have laughed at all.
Well, it's just far too political, and actually the Royals are not supposed to show any sort of political leanings or anything. So they probably really would have disagreed with that, because it was, as much as people want to argue it, it was a political performance. But it just went on and on, didn't it? It's shadowed this whole year, actually. Ever since May, it's just been rammed down our throats throughout. It's dying down a bit, but I'm still seeing it so much on television, and it's getting annoying. And as I said, it's just pissing off the people of this country. And then, of course, sort of midsummer time, it was all COVID was bubbling down a bit. Everyone was sort of feeling quite relaxed, weren't they? Moving away from BLM now. It was, and then the Eat Out to Help Out came about, didn't it? And everyone was thinking, well, I certainly wasn't, but a lot of people were thinking, the virus is gone. We can do what we like.
Yay!
We can go out and have a party, and we can gather on the beaches, and we can do all of this, and don't have to worry about it anymore. It's not killing anyone. And then, of course, the Eat Out to Help Out, everyone went out and mixed. And the direct result of that, as well as the schools going back in September, was that we ended up going into and eventually going into a second lockdown in November. But that was a brief period of respite in the year where everyone thought, okay, still not quite normal, but it's the closest to normal as we've seen since February, March. But yeah, and then the second wave started bubbling away, and we saw the emergence of the tier system, the first version 1 of the tier system, and then we had because that didn't work, obviously, and then we had the 2nd November lockdown, and then we had the new tier system and tier 4 right up to Christmas, and then of course amongst all of that we had the US election.
Could I just say about the second lockdown? It worked nowhere near as well as the first lockdown. The first lockdown, everybody was like, right, if we get through this, we're gonna be able to get back to normal. Obviously, you always get some idiots who say, "Oh, no, I'm not listening to him," like Dominic Cummings, for example.
Well, exactly.
Just some like satire for anybody out there who wasn't sure what that was. But the second lockdown, nobody was having it. People arguing over the fact that local businesses had to close down, what was classed as an essential shop, what wasn't classed as an essential shop.
The problem is public trust was eroded, wasn't it, at that point?
The whole schools were allowed to open, whereas in the first lockdown it was only key workers' children who were allowed to go to school. That was a massive mistake, because as we know, there's now a new strain,
two new strains,
one of which, or they may both have disability, but one of which is spread mainly through children. And there's now massive question marks over whether schools should reopen, whether schools should shut, whether we need to go into a third lockdown. Frankly, my opinion is, if this strain is so effective, and they're saying that this is the third strain, is one of the worst strains, is the worst strain of COVID-19 that is around at the moment. If that's the case, and it's easily spread amongst children, close schools. If there's a fourth strain, if there's two strains out there, if there's two strains out there at the moment, or if there's 4 strains out there at the moment, lock it down. Say, work from home. Don't bumble about saying work from home, but don't work from home. Get the bus, but don't get the bus. Eat cake, but don't eat a cake, because it targets fat people. How could we forget it targets fat people? I've survived this long without getting it, so I'm obviously not fat enough. But they need to set out clear instructions. We are going into a third lockdown. No schools are going to open. No workplaces are going to open. Everybody's got. The majority of people will have to work from home. The only people who can work in their normal workplaces are NHS, police officers, and people who work at supermarkets, because obviously supermarkets have to stay open because people need to eat. But don't eat because again, it targets fat people. So you can only eat vegetables.
But yeah, just going on from that point, I think if I was to give some advice to Boris, because after this episode, we're no longer going to be here criticizing him because this is the end of the channel. But what I would say is just stop giving false hope. I think this is a major problem. And I've seen it emerging with the whole Christmas thing. They give the public false hope and then they let them down at the last minute, and it pisses people off. And then people are much less likely to take them seriously. If they'd, with this whole Christmas thing, and we're going to talk about this in a bit, the lockdown easings at Christmas, if they'd been straight, I mean, it didn't take Einstein to work out when they initially announced 5 days relaxation over Christmas, it was going to be a disaster. But somehow they didn't see it. But if they'd said at the start of December, right, we're only going to be able to have 1 day, and it's going to be this many people, and that's just the way it is, because we're looking at the rates, it's going up, we're going to have a disaster. If we want to avoid a lockdown in January in the new year, we've got to do it this way. But they didn't. They gave you false hope. They said you could have as good a Christmas as you could possibly have. You can have 5 days of no restrictions, all of that, only to take it away from people a few days before Christmas when they'd made all of their plans and everything. It doesn't help the cause. It doesn't help the government at all. It doesn't help public health at all when they're giving false hope. And I think moving forward, Boris has got to sort himself out, and he's got to say to the public, say it to them straight, and people will respect him far more than giving false hope and getting people's hopes up only to crash them at the last minute. I mean, mental health, for example, is already a massive crisis. But giving people false hope and then letting them down is exacerbating it. It doesn't help at all. So moving forward, I think he's got a level with the public. So that's my comment really on COVID overall. But yeah, I mean, the Christmas relaxation, what do you think about that? How do you think that went?
Again, he let people down at the last minute. People have made plans, and you think the amount of times he's let people down this year, did many people actually follow the rules and just meet up with people on Christmas Day? I think it's easy.
I suspect it's likely they did, even in Tier 4 areas where they weren't allowed to have a Christmas at all.
It's easy to say, oh, I'm going to see someone in my support bubble. I'm going to care for a child, etc., etc. I've heard it all over the last 2 days, and the amount of cases that have happened over the Christmas period, over Thursday through to Sunday, that is absolutely shocking.
Well, I think I saw one of the headlines today. It's the highest number of daily cases so far in the pandemic. I mean, that says it all, doesn't it? It was a total disaster.
You have to think, if on Christmas Day, your old great Aunt Nellie is showing symptoms, just because it's Christmas, you can't go around. Just because that's the one day that Boris has said that you're allowed, there's no restrictions, you can go wherever you want, depending on what tier you're in. If your great Aunt Nellie is showing symptoms, don't go to see her, because you will be told to self-isolate. And unfortunately, you're the ones who look stupid, not us.
No. But I'm afraid, the inevitable result of all of this, I think, is another national lockdown. And I think it's coming very quickly, either in the form of another tier, there's rumours about that, or we're going to have a proper national lockdown again, and a more lengthy one as well, because November, 4 weeks of that sort of lockdown just was useless. You need a proper full lockdown. But the problem is, can we afford to do that? That's the problem now. We're in such huge debt. The economy is so crashed that it's will they do it? But looking at the numbers, I can't see they can possibly do anything else. I mean, it's just skyrocketing at the moment, thanks to their Christmas shambles.
It's not a case of can we afford to do it. It's we need to do this.
Well, yeah.
To be able to get back.
But you know what they're going to be like? They're going to be dithering because they're going to be saying, can we afford to do this? There's going to be people like Rishi arguing, we can't do this. The economy's crippled. It would destroy the economy. No way we can do it.
Tough. The only people that are to blame are the public.
And the public.
There are lots of people to blame. The government are to blame for dithering, and the public are to blame for not following the government advice. The vaccine, for example. Obviously, it's great news that we got a vaccine at last. And there are multiple vaccines rolling out across the country, being given to vulnerable people or the elderly or NHS workers, which is great news. It's a great way to end 2020, thinking, right, this could potentially be a way forward.
Yeah.
And a way to control the virus. But the amount of people I've seen, and I work with people who have said, I'm not getting the vaccine, it all happened too quickly, something's dodgy. What's going to happen? Are you going to grow a left foot from your ear?
I can understand some people's apprehension at the rate it's been produced, because we've never seen vaccines being produced this quickly on this sort of scale ever, and normally it goes through years and years of testing. So on that side of it, I can see it, but at the same time, it has been tested rigorously, and also we haven't got the time to worry about it. And all of these stupid people saying that it's lethal, or that it's got some sort of microchip in it and they want to track us all. It's total nonsense, and it's actually dangerous, some of the things that people are sharing. And I'm telling you now, these people saying they're not going to take it, no way will I take it. If the government aren't going to make it compulsory, but what will happen is that airlines, we've seen today that Ryanair have got a new thing saying jab and go. That's their new slogan. If you want to have a normal life, you are going to have to take this vaccine, because if you want to go into theatres, I think it could go, all sorts of places, theatres, if you want to travel, if you want to go on holiday, if you want to go into another country, there'll probably be border checks and they'll have to show it. If you want to live a normal life, you're not going to have a choice. So don't fill your minds with all this nonsense. And it is nonsense, as far as I'm concerned, until I see proper proof of it. Because we're the home of common sense on here. And unless I see facts, I am not buying any of this nonsense. And it doesn't help sharing it all on social media. We need people to take this vaccine so that we can get back to normal life.
And can I just add, on top of that there's microchips in the vaccine. If there's a microchip in the vaccine that tells the government where you are and what you're doing, what's the difference between that and a mobile phone?
Well, exactly. It's a very good point. People are just trying to find an excuse not to take it.
Anyone who says that, I think you might need your head checking. You might need to change your tinfoil hat. Because your phone sends out a signal every time you pass a telephone mast, sends out a signal, and somebody can track you. Someone knows exactly where you are. And if Bill Gates is
another thing, yeah. Bill Gates is all behind this. That's another one of the conspiracy theories.
Putting a microchip in this to tell you how you feel, and to sort of tell you what you need to eat. Go ahead. I need to lose some weight. I need to be a bit happier. Bill Gates, hit me up.
Yeah, and one last comment I'll make on COVID, really, I think it's to do with the vaccine a little bit, but it's more the point, and it is linked to over-promising again from the government's point of view. And what we're hearing about looking to next year and 2021, what they seem to be saying at the moment is that by April, May, we may see some resemblance of normality again. And I'm going to make a prediction. Call me Nostradamus. But I am going to make a prediction that that's not going to happen. And I'll tell you why. There was apparently a leaked document. Again, they're so leaky, this government. But another document has come out saying that by the spring, they hope to have something like 22 million people vaccinated. Now, bearing in mind, we have over 60 million people in this country. That is not a lot, is it? And I'm no mathematician, but 20 million out of 60 odd million is not achieving enough immunity to return to normality. And so again, I fear that the government are giving false hope again, and they're trying to get people's hopes up. And I just think, I don't want to be depressing and say it's not going to happen. I'd love it for it to be back to normal by April, May, but it's just not going to happen, is it? When you only have 22 odd million vaccinated at that point, it's not enough. It's just not enough. That's not going to account for all the vulnerable people that need to have this vaccine. Once all the vulnerable people are vaccinated, then we can make some progress and lift things a bit. Once those that need the most protection are protected, then we can do things. But 22 million won't be enough at that point. So I'm predicting August or September, more likely, I think. But that's my prediction. See if I'm right. I don't know. But yes, that's my final comment on COVID. Really.
Well, we need to be realistic. Nothing's going to change.
Well, that's it.
The back end of next year. So as soon as we hit January the 1st, it's not all going to go away, and it's not going to. COVID's not going to think, oh no, they're in a different year.
No.
Well, we can't go past this. There's not a force field around 2021. That makes it a safe haven. It's going to get worse before it gets better, unfortunately.
I'm afraid so. We should probably backpedal a bit because we sort of missed the US election. We should probably comment on that briefly, considering we did our last major live event on this channel was covering the build-up to the US election, and what an aftermath it was. We obviously weren't around to cover that because of everything that was happening in my family, but what a shambles that all was, with all of Donald Trump's allegations.
It took about 3 weeks for the result to come through, didn't it?
It took a long time, and then you had Trump throwing these accusations around, getting them to do recounts. He still hasn't formally.
Stop the count.
He still hasn't formally, congratulated Joe Biden and actually accepted that he's lost this election. And it's doing him no favors whatsoever. The guy looks like a complete maniac, suggesting that this entire thing is rigged. Unbelievable. It is just quite a staggering state of affairs. But it looks to me like none of these allegations are going to go anywhere. They've all been debunked so far. So I think Biden has safely got the keys into the White House, I think.
And the thing is, the morning after the election, the Wednesday morning, he was there saying, "Oh, we've won this election. We've got another 4 years in office." And actually, no, bye-bye.
No. No. And
It's been a roller coaster, but thanks for everything. Switch the lights off on your way out.
yeah, and part of me thinks that he's so reluctant to go because Trump had all of these um, allegations made against him fairly recently, which he managed to protect himself from because he was in the White House and president. Once you lose the role as president, you're exposed. And I think he's fearful that someone's going to get him with all of these accusations.
Fingers crossed.
I think that's partly to do with it, and also he doesn't want to accept it because he's a terrible loser. But a weird part of me will miss Trump because he has provided some staggering entertainment over the last 4 years. But I am overall very, very relieved to see the back of him. And I think the whole way he's handled this election has summed it all up, really, that Biden is by no means a saint and is by no means a particularly strong president. But I think, this was the way this election went was the best, really, for the country and for the rest of the world, I think. But yes, that was the US election. What a time that was.
So all that we have left to do is go over quick entertainment, quick sport, and then we're done.
Yep.
This has been an absolute roller coaster. So some of the biggest sports stories from England, obviously the English Premier League was halted in March due to the coronavirus pandemic and didn't start again until late June, and actually saw Liverpool lift the trophy for the first time in 30 years. And they ran away with that trophy, and that pains me. It pains me to say that as a Manchester United supporter. In terms of Manchester United, Marcus Rashford did amazing things in arguing with Boris, and actually seeing Boris back down over giving children free school meals multiple times this year. There was the first case, and then he asked him to extend it, and Boris said, "No, I'm not extending it." And then it turns out Boris did extend it. With European football, Bayern Munich lifted the Champions League after what was a shocking final between the German Bundesliga champions Bayern Munich and the French Ligue 1 champions Paris Saint-Germain. Plymouth Argyle, my local team, got promoted to League 1, slowly making our way up to the Premier League. Hoping for the day Plymouth Argyle played Manchester United, although not really sure who I would support in that case. I think that's all. I think that's all the entertainment news.
All the sports and entertainment news, yeah. So I think sort of closing comments, really. I just want to say a few things about the podcast, really. It's to be honest, in a year of such turmoil and such uncertainty, the podcast for me has been one of the highlights of this year, because it has, I think, changed the both of us for the better. I think it's made us into very different people and better people. I think, we've known each other since the beginning of uni, and I think we've come on leaps and bounds since then. We were both very we didn't have any confidence in ourselves at all, really. I had a very low self-confidence, and I was building it up over uni, but really this year I've found it, which is ironic because it's the year where I haven't been able to socialize. But genuinely, from doing things like this, the podcast, it's made me think about the world in a very different way. And it's made me think that, I was one of these people that we complain about now. who would just naively jump on a bandwagon and support a trend that was going on without actually reading into things. And now, before I do anything or say anything or endorse anything, I read into it, because you have to have some common sense and you have to just work things out for yourself rather than just jumping on a bandwagon for the hell of it. But I've thoroughly enjoyed doing this. It's been great. And I now know my own mind, really. I think before I never really knew or had the confidence to express my opinions. And, you know, unfortunately, we talk about free speech all the time, but there isn't such thing as free speech, which is why, unfortunately, one of the reasons why we're sort of bringing this channel to a close now that we're both in the world of work, because there are certain things that you can't say. And, you know, talking about political stuff can be difficult. Unfortunately, this is the world we live in. You know, I'm all about free speech, and there's so many people on YouTube doing it, which is fantastic. But when you've got a job and stuff, it becomes difficult. As we've seen, people get cancelled or fired for expressing their opinions. Everyone has a right to an opinion. And I just wish we could all go back to be able to have a good old debate, and actually have your own opinions and then make up at the end of it. Unfortunately, that's not the world we live in. So that's the reality. But I would encourage you all, you know, don't feel bad for having an alternative opinion, because it is human nature to develop an opinion on something. So you've got to say what you think, and that's what we've tried to do over the last 6 months, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
So it's hard to think of anything different to say that Harry hasn't already said. So basically, frankly, first of all, I have to say, when I came up with the idea to do a podcast, Harry was really reluctant to do it, and I had to sort of twist his arm, and we had to figure out together how we were going to do it, the appropriate formats for it. We started by doing one topic, like the week's news, song for the week, and then the debate, and that sort of went to pot after a while. And we just ranted for as long as we felt. But actually, it is something that I've really enjoyed doing. As Harry said, I found a confidence in myself to express my opinion and not really care about what I'm saying. And there was a certain point, if you watch our previous episodes, there's a point where you can see a change in us. The first episode, avoid at all costs.
See, now you've said that, people are going to go and watch that and see how woke and snowflakey we were.
But the lockdown, especially the first lockdown for me, wasn't easy. No. For reasons that I'm not going to go into, because I don't really want to go into those reasons now. The podcast has enabled me to talk about it, enabled me to be open about it, and offer advice to anybody who might, just on the off chance, click on the video and go, actually, I do feel like that. And we've touched on topics that I would never have imagined we would have been talking about. COVID-19, what happened to the previous 18. That's a joke. That's a joke I've loved hearing for the last who knows how long. COVID-19, BLM, we've talked about police. We've chosen our top 20 comedy songs. Well, we've had special appearances from our parents. On and off
Cameo ones
screen.
from mine that weren't intended, but I'm
On
sure
and
we'll
off
make a
screen.
blooper reel at some point of all the mishaps. But
Well, we've argued, but most importantly, we proved that we can argue with people. But at the end of the argument, we can say, actually, what you've just said, partially right. And there's no falling out. We don't start a war over
you can
it.
agree to disagree, basically.
But we disagree all the time, and somehow here we are.
But actually, overall, we share the same opinions,
Yeah.
and politically, we're probably quite different in our political stances. You're more of a Labour voter. I'm probably more of a Conservative voter. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you disagree from time to time. This is what the sad world we've become, is that people seem to think that it's not acceptable to have another opinion. Otherwise, if you have another opinion, you're sexist or you're racist or you're any of those terms that people like to dish out. And that is not always the case. You can't just jump to conclusions about people when they might actually have a valid point. People jump to conclusions about our views on Black Lives Matter and they just go racist because you don't support an organization that's called Black Lives Matter. It's not. It's the nuance in conversation that people don't seem to understand anymore. It's very strange. But yes, I think that's all I've got to say, really. Unless you have any more ending words, I think that brings us to the end of the road, I think.
But yeah, this was an idea hatched by me. I can't remember how the idea came about. But basically, it's been a riot. Well, we've had some laughs, we've had rants, we've had disagreements. Well, we've had poignant moments as well. But it's been a roller coaster. It's been an absolute riot. Would I change any of it? Not at all. We've expanded the podcast. We've shortened the podcast. We've turned it upside down and shaken it until all of its money's come out. And most of all, the podcasts have stolen money from us massively. But from the both of us, thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing, and thank you for your ongoing support. We may be back with something new.
I was going to say, watch this space, because we are working on a new concept for a channel that we may be able to do from time to time. But there'll be more news on that when we've formulated a plan. But yeah, we will be back at some point doing something when we find the time. But obviously, we're in the world of work, so we can't put our whole lives into a YouTube channel. But there will be something coming, that's for sure.
In the meantime, head over to Facebook, search up Sam Hanna Comedy. You will find my comedy page where myself, Harry, and Ronan will be there to keep you entertained during the long, arduous COVID months ahead. But once again, thank you for subscribing. Your support doesn't go unnoticed at all. But we are at the end of the road, so we may see you on a distant planet at some point in the future when Bill Gates has got us to Mars.
When this one's been set on fire because of climate change, but there we go.
Because of Billy Joel.
Yes. Still saying, I didn't start the fire.
Adamant, I didn't start the fire. It was him. It was him over there.
But yeah, all we can say is thank you very much, and we wish you all the very, very best for the next rocky few months and the next year. Let's hope that there is some light at the end of the tunnel next year. From all of us here on Hanna and Eastwood Get Real. Goodbye.
Goodbye.